I wanted to offer you a few reflections from yesterday when we officially opened this Lambeth conference with a spectacular Eucharist at Canterbury Cathedral. Big, splendid celebration with 600 plus bishops and 1,500 worshipers filling the cathedral with music from the Congo, from Melanesia, from the great English choral tradition, all woven together beautifully. A sermon by the Bishop of Colombo in Sri Lanka, a really splendid sermon. You can read about it in detail online. The bishop reminded us of three essential markers he saw as the gifts, particular gifts to our Anglican communion. The first was the gift he called us to reappropriate of self-examination, to look closely at our own lives, to begin there before we start assessing anybody else's life, to self-examination, to look at our own shortcomings, our own faults, our own challenges. It harked back to something Archbishop Rowan said at the retreat when he reminded us that the early saints in the desert, those desert mothers and fathers, were very rigorous on themselves at judging themselves, at assessing how far short they fell of Christ's call before they ever were willing to criticize or condemn another. They were very reluctant to do that. The second thing he called us to was to be reminded of our inclusiveness, the inclusiveness that has characterized the Anglican way from the beginning. He said there's a place in this church for everyone, absolutely everyone, regardless of race or class or gender or sexual orientation or any of the innumerable things the world uses to divide people. And the third thing he reminded us of was our prophetic tradition, the call to us by Christ to speak for those who have no voice, to stand against injustice in this world, to speak out, to protect those who are in real and grave danger throughout the world. The church has a role, and that kind of witness will be noticed. In the afternoon, Archbishop Rowan opened the business of the Lambeth Conference, really, with his presidential address. We heard from members of the Lambeth Design Group and the Covenant Design Group, that group of people charged with carrying forward the process of drafting proposals for an Anglican covenant. We were introduced to the methodology of Indaba groups, this way of asking the bishops to weigh in on matters that are before the church. We're not going to be avoiding any of the hard questions, we were reminded. Issues of inclusion, the strains that have been produced by after the ordination of Bishop Robinson to the Diocese of New Hampshire. Issues of biblical interpretation, issues of the limits of the diversity of our life as a communion. But we're going to be doing that with these Indaba groups. It's based on an African way of calling villages together to decide important matters. Indaba is a Zulu word. The Archbishop reminded us, for those persons who are concerned that this style of decision-making conversation is a way of avoiding decisiveness, he reminded us that the Lambeth Conference has used a Western model of resolutions and voting things up and down in the past, and long-term, you might ask how effective that has been. He's hoping that this way of basing a conversation deep in Bible study and in prayer together will result in a better outcome, a deeper outcome. Certainly squares with my hopes that, as I've said from the beginning, I hope there isn't an awful lot that will hit the headlines in the newspaper, but that something very, very deep will happen here, a shift. That our church will realize we can't be simply a loose federation of self-governing churches that gathers periodically for a little chat, but we have to be deeply attentive to each other. We have much to learn from each other. I've learned that already. So keep your prayers going. Please join us in the Bible study daily. You can find those citations and the questions that will be guiding our Bible studies on the diocesan website. You continue to be in my prayers, and I am grateful for yours. I'll talk to you again.